Welcome back to the After Aston I podcast. I'm Amy, and I've got Geoff here with me, and we are very much looking forward to getting stuck into a conversation with our next guest. But before we do that, we wanted to let our Aston alumni listeners know that you can take advantage of a 20% loyalty scholarship for postgraduate study here at Aston. It gets automatically applied as a tuition fee discount, and there's no application process, so it's really straightforward. So if you are an Aston grad and you're thinking of continuing your education, do take a look at our postgraduate programs and the alumni scholarship so that you can get that 20% off. We'll pop some useful links in the show notes. Right now, though, I'm delighted to share that our guest for this episode is Arese Ugwu. Geoff, I'll hand over to you for the intro.
Thank you very much. Arese graduated from Aston in 2006 with a degree in business management. Since then, she's been leading a movement empowering African millennial women to make smart financial decisions. With a background in wealth management and storytelling, she's created best-selling books, a hit Netflix series, and the Smart Money Tribe podcast, which went to #1 on Apple's top shows podcast list in the first week of its release. Her work simplifies finance while connecting women to relevant financial products. Recognized by CNN, Bloomberg, and Forbes Africa, she also serves on corporate boards and has recently partnered with Samsung for a Smart Money Woman spin-off feature film. In 2021, she was recognized as one of the most influential people of African descent. Arese, welcome to the After Aston I podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this interview.
Arese, so it is so difficult to know where to start, having listened to Geoff list all of those accolades and experiences. You've done so much and had so much success. But I wondered if we could go back in time a little bit. When did you decide to make empowering African women to make smart money decisions the focus point for your career?
So for me, it all started with my own sort of setbacks when it came to my personal finances. So I worked in wealth management. I was doing all these big transactions and my marriage falls apart. I have a 1-year-old child in tow and I basically have to start my life again, get a new apartment, all the fun stuff. And I found that it was really expensive, but it was a really big aha moment for me because I started to think about the fact that my own personal finances weren't in order. And I started to think about the fact that we're not really taught about building assets that can protect us in the future enough. So I was thinking, who's talking to women like me who are smart, who are in different, industries, but are doing well, don't have the excuse of being low income earners, but are living from paycheck to paycheck. So I decided that I wanted to basically start creating content and tools that helped women like me. So from basically reassessing my own financial decisions, I thought, you know what, I'm onto something here. So my first foray into this was writing for a platform called Bella Niger, a Nigerian blog at the time. And the article was called A Chanel Bag versus a Stock Portfolio. And it basically kind of took off from there because there was a time where people really just cared about who was having sex with who, celebrity gossip. They didn't really care about personal finance kind of business content. So the fact that that did well, I was like, okay, there's something here. So I started writing the articles, and along the line, one of my friends was like, I think you should write a book, which I thought was completely crazy at the time because I was like, I read books, I don't write them. But it planted a seed, and I started thinking, if I was going to write a book, what kind of book would I write? Would it be like an A to Z of like financial decisions or personal finances? But because I was quite obsessed with Sex and the City while I was in Aston, and I liked the idea of like a friendship and the idea of making this really tough, topic fun. So I started to write this story about 5 Nigerian girls, their pain points when it came to money, love, family, and especially as it pertained to being African or being an African woman, because I found that there weren't a lot of resources that were Africa specific. A lot of it was like Eurocentric or American. So I started to write this story. It had all these fabulous entertaining things that happen with women. But instead of like sex as a topic. It was money as the center of like the conversations. And then it had smart money lessons and exercises at the end of each chapter. So that's how it started with the book. And then the book, I went on a Pan-African book tour to countries like Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa. Everyone kept saying, I could totally see this as a movie. I could totally see this as a movie. So I went and started thinking, if I was going to turn this into a movie, what would that look like, given that I haven't gone to film school? But eventually we figured it out. We had a season 1. It went on Africa Magic, which is a local channel here. And then a year later, it got picked up by Netflix. And then we were on Netflix for about 2 years. And then we created a season 2. And now we're on YouTube.
We've got so many questions to ask about book tours and Netflix. But
Yeah.
before we get to that, you said you had that aha moment at the very beginning where you suddenly thought, what is out there to offer advice? Did you also have that moment where you thought, well, there has to be something? It can't be that nobody's done this before. And where you looked around and then found there wasn't? Or you definitely have that kind of, surely somebody's done something.
Actually, when I was looking for myself, I was like, surely there has to be something that, to be honest, I wasn't really sure what I was looking for. I was just looking for tools to help me. But then in doing the research and reading and stuff, I was like, none of this is really speaking to me, because it's a lot of stuff is like, oh, student debt loan problem. We don't have a student debt loan problem in Nigeria. No one's giving you loans for university. We don't have a credit card problem in Nigeria, but we do have personal debt issues in this part of the world, but they weren't specifically, like, the content that was online was not specifically tailored to solve African problems. So for example, nuanced things like what it means to be the firstborn child in an African household and what the financial responsibility is. So that's why I think it really resonated with a lot of women across Africa, because it was like, wow, I feel seen, right? Because whether you were Nigerian or you were South African, you could relate to the problem of a black tax. You could relate to even more than I thought it would be relatable. Because when I went on a book tour, for example, to South Africa, one of the things that came up was, we're first generation. One of the women was like, I'm a first generation post-apartheid kid, right? And the responsibility of looking after my family after they've sacrificed so much for me to go to university and have this education where they aren't really earning a lot. I have to give back and make sure like the family's okay. But sometimes that looks like going out and taking a credit card off the bat. Like, it's like you get your first job, you take a credit card out, and before you've even had time to find your legs, like financially, you're already in a lot of debt. In Nigeria, it looks very much like you get your first job, your family has sacrificed so much for you to get to that point. And then it's like, now everyone, I don't want to say has their hand out, but like everyone has needs, and it then becomes that firstborn child's problem to basically like solve the family's problems. So nuanced things like that like maybe a European person wouldn't have to like consider really made the book quite popular. Or the things like how culturally what it means to be married and in Nigeria or in Africa and be a female breadwinner, what that looks like in terms of navigating your personal finances, especially if your partner is not earning as much as you, and you still have to consider like the cultural aspects of it. So I think things like tackling things like that in story format made it really interesting for African women specifically.
And when you started writing the book, obviously you've got the idea, you know how you're going to approach it. As you start going through, did you have any of those moments where it kind of, you realized things that you knew but had never considered before, kind of lessons almost that you were teaching yourself as you went along? Did it kind of change your view on anything?
So did it change anything about me? I think it did. I think this entire journey has changed so much about me, because the thing about even writing is, as you write, you're learning, as you know, do your research, as you're trying to figure out stories. Because the thing is, the book tackles so many different things, some of which apply to me and some of which don't. And in trying to figure all of that stuff out, I was learning so much. And I was learning from other people's stories, other people's strategies. So yeah, I did learn a lot.
Fantastic. It sounds like such a maybe adrenaline filled experience. Perhaps you didn't know what was going to come round the corner. How were you feeling at that time? You'd been through this kind of challenging personal experience, you'd had that
Mm.
aha moment, but everything that came along after that, how did it make you feel?
Grateful. Like, do you know, it's one of the most fulfilling things in the world, right? To be able to create something that other people respond to so strongly is such a blessing. Like every single day, like I get emails or DMs from people saying, "Oh my God, this book changed my life. I could totally see myself as Zuri. I feel like my friend is Adesua." And that is such a huge thing for me because now it's been 10 years since I self-published the book and I still get those messages. So there's something very humbling about it. There's something very fulfilling about it to know that you could do work that actually touches people so deeply and it doesn't really have anything to do with you. It's like they're obsessed with the characters in that world that you created.
Talk to me a bit about legacy because it sounds like it was an emotional journey, it was a fulfilling journey, but you've said 10 years on. Did
Mm.
you ever think it would have legacy in the way that it has done? And what do you think that impact is moving forward?
Do you know what's so interesting? I remember writing this book mostly in my pajamas in my home office and just thinking at different points, who's going to care? Right. And I'm so grateful that I didn't stop because I didn't stop when it was basically time to write the book. I didn't stop when it was like turning the book into a TV series and really bringing it to life, even if it was really challenging to do both, because obviously I'd never written a book before. The best I had done is like maybe like my Aston dissertation or my dissertation at UCL or something. Like I honestly did not know what I was doing. I was just really following the opportunity. So 10 years on to see that like I've created this thing that's so much bigger than me, like that it has become like such a huge brand name in Africa is is such a big deal to me. I feel if I died tomorrow, people are still going to be, "Oh my God, I love that book so much," or "I love that TV show so much." And more than that, hearing the words, "It changed my life," or "It helped me, you know, improve my personal finances. I started investing better. I started budgeting better, or it changed my mindset when it came to money." It's such a huge thing. So that is my legacy.
When you're on a book tour, and particularly a book tour when kind of the characters have taken on a life of their own, when they mean so much to people, did you ever find a situation where people would almost be looking around for the characters, kind of thinking they must be real, they have to be here, it can't just be this person? Does it get that crazy on a book tour?
I think now that we have the TV series, it's the actors that really have to worry about that because they're like, "Yeah, I wrote it." And I guess it was in stages, right? Like, so at first I was on the book tour and there were no actors. It was just people just loved the characters. And more than anything, they saw themselves in the characters. So people would come up to me and say, "I am Zuri." Like, I feel like you were looking into my life and this is me, right? Or, "My God, my friend is Adesua," or "My friend is Lara." And, you know, I used to get all of that. So people were already really invested in the characters. But then when it turned into a TV series, it just became a whole nother thing. Like even my actors, because almost all of them on the cast, they're big Nollywood actors now, right? Like they have huge followings, millions of followers on Instagram and Twitter. And they will still say that till this day, they've never worked on a project where people are like literally accosting them and being like, "Zuri," "Zuri this," or "Lara that." They have their own sort of like fan base based off of the show and the book and all of that. And they love it because they're like, "This is so wild. We've done, films and we've done movies, but we've never seen this sort of thing." But I guess it's because the audience was almost like inbuilt or there already before like the TV series. So it was almost like they felt like they were following me on this journey of, we love the book, now she's turned into a TV series. And then I was showing the process of, oh my God, I got the sponsorship. Oh my God, I've signed on this director. Oh my God, we're actually producing this thing. So it felt like the audience kind of followed us through the process, even when I was choosing cast. Like when I was figuring out which actor was going to play what, it felt like they were very involved in the process.
It's a lot of pressure, I imagine, picking the right person for the right role. Was that an angst-ridden process for you?
Yes and no. So when I was writing the book, in order to visualize it, even if I had zero intention of turning it into a movie or a TV series at the time, because I hadn't thought that far, but to help me visualize it, I kept thinking, who would play Zuri in a movie? If this was a movie and I was writing it out or whatever, like who would play this character? And I thought, oh my God, Osase Godaro, because she's a Bini girl, where Zuri's from. She's pretty. I loved her acting and all of that. So I thought it would definitely be her. A couple of years later, we're at this party and she's like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with the book. And she sends me a message like later on that night saying, listen, I'm just shooting my shot, but if you ever turn this into a movie, I want to be in it. I was like, you have to be kidding me, because I already thought about you. Like you were who I was visualizing even before like we ever thought about making a movie. And I had already started, by the time she reached out to me, I had started trying to figure out what the business model would be, how to raise, how the funding, would come about and all of that. So it was a very interesting like time. So she kind of put herself on the project, and then it was like before we even started producing or even raised the capital, I was going into rooms saying Osase Godaro is playing Zuri. So it was very fortuitous like that. And then with the other characters, it was mostly like, because you know how when you create characters or you've written something, I see them in a certain way in my head. So it was now like, who should play this? And then maybe I'd watch a movie and I'll say, actually, I like her. I think she'd make a great Tammy, or I think she'd make a great Lara. And it just kind of happened, like that. But you know what was hard? The character that was hard to actually cast was Shola, the male lead, because we don't have that many, like we have so many Nollywood actresses, but getting tall, dark, and handsome, and the way that I had pictured it in my head was just so hard. So we did like a special audition for that, and we ended up with SODK, who had maybe done only one or two other things. In fact, at the time, he wasn't really interested in being an actor. He wanted to rap. So he had started his music career, and he was just kind of like doing acting as a little side project thing. But then he was like, whoa, when he did Smart Money Woman, like his whole acting thing, took off. So I was so grateful that we actually took our time to find the right person for the role.
That sounds absolutely phenomenal. And I hope I'm asking a question our listeners are interested in here. Tell us about some of the behind the scenes moments from filming. What's memorable? What sticks in your mind?
What's not memorable? Just imagine someone who has a business degree, who worked in finance, who wrote a book, and then decides that she wants to turn the book into a TV series. It was hectic because, first of all, I had to put a technical team together that actually knew what they were doing. And then I had all these grand ideas, especially with season 2, because we did season 1. It went on Netflix and it went straight to number 1, the first day, and it stayed in the top 10 for 13 weeks. So with season 2, I was like, oh my God, I want to do this bigger and better. And for season 2, I wrote the script. And I remember writing the script. And then when my editor saw the script, he was like, you're writing like a writer. You're not writing like a producer, Arese, because I don't know how we're going to execute all these like scenes, like all these big scenes that you're writing. It's so unrealistic. And I also wanted to shoot in South Africa. And at the time I was writing the script, I had no idea how I was going to fund that, how I was going to make that happen. But my whole approach to it was, you know what, write your biggest possible, grandest vision for this thing. And since you're producing anyway, you'll pare it down to reality as you go along. So things like, I had this idea for an opening scene that was at a beach to depict our Lagos night, beach life that I don't think we see on TV that much. And that was so important to me. But did the weather allow us to do it, smoothly? It took us 4 days and 5 different tries, to get that scene that's only maybe 3 minutes, because maybe we would be shooting today and then we don't have enough extras and we have to do the scene again, or it starts raining, or the branding doesn't come on time. Just so many different things that just did not come together, as planned. Or when we went to South Africa, we partnered with the South African Tourism Board and went to South Africa to do a 10-day shoot to shoot one episode. So we shot in Joburg and Cape Town. And one of the things, the first setback was half the team didn't get their visas on time. And we had already booked all these venues. I was already in South Africa. We literally had to now start rallying, trying to figure out how they were going to get their visas. When they eventually get them, we have 7 days left to shoot. So we now have to compress a 10-day shoot into a 7-day shoot, which was so manic and so painful, to do. And of course, in Cape Town as well, weather issues. We'd gotten this huge boat, which cost thousands of dollars, to shoot on. And it only makes it to maybe 3 seconds in the actual finished, product, because the day that we're shooting, the weather just changes and the water's choppy. The drone can't get around properly. One of the actresses starts throwing up because she's seasick. It was just a mess. But we had to basically rally and, make it work. But yeah, film is very unpredictable.
You begin in business and then you move into this creative field. It's like you say, 1 minute you're someone who's in a business world, the next minute you're suddenly producing films. You've had a front row insight into where business and creativity collide. What advice would you give for anyone looking at a career at that point where those two worlds collide? When maybe they're coming from a creative background and they need to know something more about business. Maybe they're coming from a business and they need to know more about the creative. When those two worlds collide, what do people need to know?
I think, first of all, the first thing I'd say is know your numbers. So if you're creative and you have this fantastic idea, it's great to have the idea, but think through what it's going to cost you. Think through how you're going to sell it and what the possible profit margins would be before you go head first. Because I think that sometimes when you're in a creative process, you tend to get carried away with the creativity of it all, as opposed to thinking about the commercial success. And I think it's important for you to start with the commercial success in mind. So I would say know your numbers, figure out what's the maybe smallest possible version of this that I could do to test it out first, and then take it from there. But I think that even as a business person, if you're going into a creative thing, those are things that you definitely need to know and have in mind. But you maybe need to be a bit more open-minded about the creative aspect of it, because I find that when I'm talking to business people about this, it's they're very gung-ho about the numbers and maybe sometimes try to stifle the creativity. But I have to sort of find a middle ground of, I want to do this, right? And I'm grateful that I'm creative enough to think about this huge, big idea. But because of my business background, I will be okay, before the crazy gets too crazy, what does this look like in terms of a budget? What does this look like in terms of the possible, ROI? Yeah. Because even then you're still going to make mistakes. You're still going to have like things to worry about. But I think that having that in mind first really helps.
Thank you. You've made me think, and my background at the moment is I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and student entrepreneurs who are trying to get projects off the ground. Everything you're describing at the moment sounds like entrepreneurial mindset. There is tolerance of risk and uncertainty, taking action when other people don't, spotting opportunities and identifying ways in which you can fill a gap, meet a market need. Have you ever considered yourself to be an entrepreneur? Is that a label you would ever use?
Of course. Like to do what I'm doing, I definitely have to be an entrepreneur because first of all, like the film industry in Nigeria, it has a long history, but we're only just getting to the point where it's the profitable, or it could be a profitable endeavor, right? Because Nollywood is an industry that basically like created itself. People just having ideas and begging their uncles and aunties for money to like, make it come to life. So before there was a Netflix, before there was an Amazon, like people were creating things, but not necessarily like doing them at scale. So I feel like I entered the industry when it was still kind of like at its baby commercial stage, where there were only a few projects that you could point to and say, oh, this has been on Netflix or this has been on Amazon. It was like literally a handful. But I would definitely say I'm an entrepreneur because I've had to have an entrepreneurial mindset about getting into the industry, about finding my own ways of like solving problems. So for example, it's simple to say now, oh my God, I turned my book into a TV series. But the reality is that was an insane idea for a lot of like Nigerian brands or a lot of Nigerian investors. Because I remember like trying to raise capital the first time and stopping because I thought, actually, I have no way of explaining to them how they can get their money back because there's no real ROI here. So films had things like you could go to the box office, but something like a TV series, we had very limited distribution channels. So at the time, the only thing I had access to was something like Africa Magic. And I had to start thinking, okay, they don't pay very much like for content on that platform. So if I was going to put it on that platform and I wanted it to be profitable, how would I go about doing that? So instead of going to investors for season one, I decided that I would go to brands. So I went to banks, I went to MasterCard, Unilever, Virgin, and I basically said, you know what? I have this book. I want to turn this into a TV series. It's already very popular, amongst women. I think you could use this demographic. Give me money to produce, and I will give you ads and product placement in exchange. Again, very novel idea at the time. It wasn't it wasn't a big way that people use to sort of like fund like their films, right? Because it's a tall order for lots of like brands. They're like, huh, you want to turn a book into a TV series? I remember a bank telling me, but you've never done this before. Like, why would we entrust you? Why would we entrust you like to go and turn a book into a TV series when you've never done this before? But it took like 9 to 10 months of convincing them that this was something that I could do and getting maybe like other brands on board. Then I go and I buy the airtime at a discount from the TV channel. So I say, I'll just buy the airtime. I'll buy it in bulk, give me a discount for 13 weeks. And then I went and I repackaged that airtime for brands. So the brands that I had spoken to, again, people didn't really do that. So it was about finding a creative way to get my idea made that was not necessarily like the ideal way that everyone else did it. So I think you definitely have to have an entrepreneurial mindset when you're thinking through a creative project, because the only thing that makes it successful is if there's some kind of business model behind it. There's some kind of thought process about who's buying it, like who wants this, who will pay for it. So yeah. I definitely think I've definitely had to be an entrepreneur, at every stage.
This is probably a very good point to point out to listeners that if you're outside of Africa and you want to watch this fantastic show, it's on YouTube, isn't it?
Yes, it's on YouTube, Azua Studios. Please help us get our views up. We're almost at 10 million views on the channel, but I could use a lot more views, especially for season 2.
We'll put some links in the show notes for all you listeners out there. Strongly recommended.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I'd like to move us on a bit then. We've focused on the show and the amazing success that you've had from that. But I'm curious, what comes next? What is next for you? What is next for the brand, the characters, everything? What comes next?
So at the moment, we're navigating a very interesting time in the film industry where Amazon has pulled out of Nigeria. So you can still sell shows to them, but they don't have the presence that they had, say, 3 years ago. Netflix is also slowly sort of like pulling back. So we have to basically figure out how to sort out our distribution. And so YouTube is something that I'm trying to figure out. I have a slate of films that I'm trying to produce and raise capital for. And I'm just really excited to see how YouTube becomes my playground and how I can, put my content on there in a way that garners like global attention. So yeah, I'm really in this filmmaking. I'm now fully focused on this filmmaking journey. I'm working on so many different projects that I hope come to life fairly soon. That's what I'm working on. And yes, Smart Money Woman, I'm working on a script for a movie because the season 2 ends with an engagement. And I want to do the Smart Money Woman movie, The Wedding. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
I hadn't got that far yet, so spoiler alert.
Sorry.
I know, I just know what to look forward to now.
Yeah.
We have a couple of quick fire questions we ask all of our guests. So I'll go with the first one. If you could have anyone in the world, dead or alive, anyone from history, anyone in the world today, on your team, working with you, making the next level happen, who would it be?
Steve Jobs for sure, because I feel like it would be amazing to pick the brain of a pioneer and someone who just used to get things done, who used to get seemingly small ideas, make them big and make them like global successes. So it'll be great to pick a brain like that.
Interesting. And the second question we have for you is, what's your favorite Aston memory? I know you talked about Sex and the City marathons earlier, but beyond those, what was your favorite memory from your time at Aston?
I think ACS. I think it was really fun to be able to come to a school like where it was amazing, but like meeting other sort of like African people or people of African descent who I'm still friends with to this day, who were also going through like a similar experience where they'd left home and they were like in this foreign country and trying to navigate being a student in Birmingham. And yeah, I missed the bull ring. Yeah, like I loved the ACS student nights. They were so fun. I miss Freshers Week. And every time I think about that, like think about having zero responsibilities, just thinking about, oh my God, like now we're uni, we have freedom and, all of that. That was a really fun time in my life. So yeah.
Oh, some great memories.
Yeah, great memories.
Arese, thank you so much for joining us on the After Aston I podcast today. It's been absolutely wonderful getting to know you and hearing all about the Smart Money Woman. Episodes are on YouTube. There's a book out there as well. Who's going to see what comes next? We will leave links to everything mentioned in the show notes, and we look forward to coming back for another episode next month. Arese, thank you.